Well, I wish all a beautiful day. Winter is definitely on the way. It was quite chilly this morning. So, uh, being in Southeast Colorado and any part of Colorado, it always starts getting a little bit chilly this time of year. But hey, it is what it is. I welcome all to the Tax Answers Advisor with Marcelino Dodge up to show number 45. Quite a little journey with a worldwide audience all throughout the US and China, Germany. It's amazing how many people are interested in US taxes around the world. But hey, it is what it is. And we enjoy sharing the information, whether you listen on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, wherever. Great. We really appreciate it. We have so much information we put out on a regular basis on this show. You're certainly welcome to always give me a call here directly. It's 844-394-4287. You can request a free mutual exploration session through our website, cashtracksfinancial.com. Then during the show or afterwards, if you have any questions as well, you can email. It's success@cashtracksfinancial.com. And we're going to discuss an interesting topic today, which has to do with, is your do-it-yourself software competing with your tax professional? This is a very interesting topic because I've been dealing with this for a long time, and I have Catherine Dalton from Taxware Systems, which also happens to be a company that I use for my professional tax software because they're a really good company and I've been using them for several years. And just a little bit know about Catherine here. She brings over 25 years experience from insurance, which is interesting. I'm also licensed in insurance myself, so I kind of can relate to that very easily. Also, she was a marketing director for an independent insurance agency in the Inland Empire and has seen challenges that insurance agents and tax professionals face to stay relevant as technologies and marketing budgets change by the lizards in the industry, of course. Yeah. Jingles and stuff that they put out there. And actually I can relate about the insurance part because you got all these things advertising, buy insurance here, call this number, buy your insurance or whatever. So that's the same. So the between insurance and tax, it's very similar.
It's very similar.
Very similar. And yes. And we appreciate how Catherine advocates for the tax professional in her role. She's a director of sales of marketing at Taxware Systems and very passionate about this topic that we're going to talk about today, which is interesting. We focus mainly on taxpayers, but yet as a taxpayer listening to this podcast, this is something that affects not just tax professionals, but it affects taxpayers because they got so much going on and they're being marketed at so much that you just got to be aware that they're going after you, but they're trying to leave out the tax professional. But yet, how important is the tax professional still going to be? Which is why we're going to talk about this today, and why I appreciate Catherine being here in supporting tax industry like she does my own business here. There is hope. We're going to stay positive, how we can achieve goals, and how, as a tax professional, I try to stay relevant, which is why many of the services I offer through my business are here, is simply because of that. So Catherine, I just want to say welcome to the program today. It's very exciting having you here. And so how are you doing today?
Thank you. Thank you, Marcelino, for inviting me. I'll admit, it's my first experience here on this type of a broadcast. And so I appreciate the opportunity to kind of stretch and grow today, right? Yeah. I'm doing well. And I'm just glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we cited, hopefully we'll be able to cover all of these, but I noticed we got like six main areas that we wanted to cover today about how tax pros, like ones like myself, we need to set ourselves apart with skills and expertise and how we can do that. How tax software companies are disloyal to the professionals in providing also do-it-yourself software. How these challenges tax professionals have, like with the insurance industry. There's similarities there, as I mentioned earlier, and I can, like say, I am insurance licensed myself, so yes, I can definitely relate to that part. What the tax pro can do to help curb that and help taxpayers, which is once again why this is important for taxpayers, is because tax pros can do more than just taxes, which is what we're really trying to do, as well as consider some stats, how self-preparing is increasing. Is that a good thing? Well, for a tax professional standpoint, it really isn't. And even for taxpayers, it may not be very good. And then even, am I as a tax professional seeing this trend and appreciating this? Well, I know I am seeing this, but are there other tax professionals appreciating this? I don't know. Because I don't know how many tax professionals actually listen to this, but if they do, you need to pay attention to this. And even taxpayers need to be aware of all this information because point of this program is to inform you what is happening in the tax industry to help you make wise choices. And as in the opening, we want you to be proactive with this as much as possible. So, okay, you ready to boil into these topics there, Catherine?
Sure. You
Okay.
lead the way.
Okay, so our first one here has to deal with the importance of how tax pros set themselves apart with their skills. So to you as an individual who's marketing for a professional software company, why do you see this as so important for tax professionals to do this?
Well, like I mentioned, 25 years in insurance, we boiled down into this, for most of those 25 years. At first, when we started, there was the yellow page advertising. There was, something in the mail that you could send, and that was about it. Marketing, wasn't out there as crazy as it is now. But as the independent agent, they needed to really not just rely on those types of methods to think that they were going to acquire, new clients and things like that. You really had to do what you could to set yourself apart. And so a lot of training went into and that training came from actually the insurance companies that the independent agent represented. And so that's kind of one of those things that's really different in the tax industry. So like, for example, Safeco, Liberty Mutual, they were awesome about it. They would really reach out to the independent agent and teach them about websites and teach them about being where their clients are, being evident. They would teach them how to share their expertise. And that is a resource that I don't see that is matched in the tax industry. Instead, you have the big names out there, in essence, undermining the tax professional because they are creating a software that they tout can do the same thing as a tax professional. And so that's really disconcerting when I came into this industry.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and certainly, yeah, that's one of the reasons why there is such a difference is because coming from the insurance industry, usually you're representing a certain company, whatever that company is, and they provide a lot of resources and usually do a lot of training, which a tax professional, usually they're a sole proprietor, usually you're a small office of some sort, they're operating their own business. And so they don't usually have those kind of support mechanisms that come in that like a larger company will provide. So yeah, a lot of tax professionals, and I know this just from my own area and where I work, is that there are many that still don't have a website today.
I find that sad. Yeah.
Yeah, then that's true. And so that's why there's companies that through like NATP, the professional association that work with them to help tax professionals to get marketing tools like website. And we may even talk about some of those tools Taxware does today. Taxware Systems has working on providing today as well. But that's where all of those are so important to come into. And the difference is with the tax industry, how it can be very disconcerting there. So you mentioned about 5 ways for tax professionals to set them apart. What do you look at those 5 ways?
Well, I have my 5 E's, I call them. The first one is to show your expertise. And I think, Marcelino, you're doing that. You're an excellent representative of that today, because that's what you are, putting yourself out there on this program every week, really trying to reach the taxpayer out there to educate them. And, there's a variety of different ways to do that. But really, number one in my book is showing your expertise. And this is one format that you can do it. There's lots of formats. Some of them, if this is too, I would consider this a very advanced format. Let's put it that way. The second, number 2 for me, is show you empathize. Like, reach out to people in their times of need, in their critical times of their life, certain life experiences, milestones. So showing that you empathize during those times is one way that really builds a strong bond with your client. For number 3 for me is being evident, like being where they are, whether it's at a chamber meeting or whether it's at a school event, that kind of thing, when we're talking about, like you said, the small business operator, tax professional, that's where they need to be. Number 4, exceed expectations, like do that step beyond, whether it's an expectation in the office or whether it's, like providing just like maybe even some water or something, an extra nice experience when they're in your presence, and in other ways via email and newsletters and things like that. And then 5th and final is hire an expert, and that doesn't have to be super expensive, but those are the things that I share and teach about often, to help the tax professional really change the playing field. Like you mentioned, it's a tilted playing field.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Yes. Um, so we talk about sharing our expertise there, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the ways that at least I'm doing it, and I know we're still encouraged, a lot in the industry, a lot of meetings encourage us as tax professionals and taxpayers uh, are using various means to find
Mm-hmm.
ones, which is why sharing our expertise is so so important. We got taxpayers who are doing searches online for tax professionals. Many times it's on a mobile device.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can, as a tax professional, it's important that we be out in these showing our expertise, be it through our website.
Mm-hmm.
I jumped on this back in 2009. I've had a Facebook page since 2009
Mm-hmm.
for my business. I've been on it
That's
since.
impressive.
Yeah, I don't know why. I just felt like, this looks important. Let me do this.
Mm-hmm.
So I just said to it, I set up a Twitter feed. Set me up a Twitter that back in 2009. I set up
Mm-hmm.
was it? Oh, I think I set up my Instagram back in 2009.
Mm-hmm.
I set up, I think I've had my LinkedIn since 2009. Granted, they haven't had the most access and everything, but
Mm-hmm.
I've had them set up and I've had them there.
That's something so much to be applauded there, Marcelino, because you have to, stay current with the technologies that are out there to, to be relevant, to connect with your customers on whatever platform that they're on or they could be
Mhm,
on. And then the other part is to just, keep moving forward with it,
mhm,
because that's, if it doesn't make sense in 2009, by 2021, it's going to be like absolutely necessary. And you've
mhm,
learned and grown with the platform through those years. And so
mhm.
you'll just be
Yeah,
even more and more comfortable.
of
So
course.
that's awesome.
Of course, it is fun. I always think back because when Facebook was just really getting started in 8 and 9, as far as when I realized, maybe that's the only reason I even got on social media
Mm-hmm.
was to advertise business. That's the only reason I really got on there personally. But anyway,
Mm-hmm.
it's funny. I still look back and I think when I got onto those originally, I got I got started so early is that the all the handles I have across those are all cash tracks. I nailed that early on with all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
that makes a big difference.
I got all that out there and sharing the expertise and doing a lot of sharing. And so
Mm-hmm.
I know I try to provide my clients with a lot of great information constantly. Granted, it may not be consistent, but I'm working at it constantly and
Mm-hmm.
using some services to help post content as well. And then of course, put out content like this to just try to keep people going, try to keep them engaged. And so, and not just looking for my local audience, but looking for, of course, in my case, nationwide, because being an
Mm-hmm.
EA, it's so important there. And then empathizing, I agree with you on the empathizing. I've done poorly in that overall, but over the last year, I've just done some simple things. Being in my little town, someone related to my client and whatever passed away, so I send them a card, and it's
Mm-hmm.
amazing the thank yous you get back just for sending a card.
It is true. It is true. And it's sincere, and it does take a bit of work, but yeah, it is very much appreciated.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, and then exceeding expectations. That's always one I've always tried to do. And a lot of clients I talk to, which is one of the things I really work at doing with clients, is just informing them. It's like I'll
Mm-hmm.
come in, especially new ones will come in from another preparer, or maybe they come in from using some DIY software, and they just need to. I sit there and I just try to explain things in a common way, just because one thing
Mm-hmm.
is with me, unlike a lot of tax professionals, and they're all great people. But one of my significant differences is the fact that this is not my first career. My first career, as I had mentioned to you before the broadcast, I actually went to school for radio and broadcasting.
That's
So
awesome.
I'm a more of a communicator. So I'll sit there and I'll explain things to them, and they're like, they'll give me that look like, well, that's interesting. Why didn't my other guy tell me? I don't know why they didn't tell you, but this is what it is. And
That's a great skill.
And so I try to do that, try to exceed expectations, and just try to always just treat them like people. Cause sometimes, at least what I've encountered sometimes, I mean, everybody I've worked with across this program have always been great people, but I know there's some tax people that just out in a way just are not nice. I will just say that. They're just, not all of them are nice people for whatever reason. There's not nice people in every industry, but still, as a tax professional, you're dealing with the public. To me, it's an essential quality, and that's part of exceeding expectations. And then you mentioned about hiring an expert. What exactly do you mean with that?
Well, from the tax professional side, that's where that vantage point, or where that's from, is that because you are so busy, you wear so many hats, and you want to exceed expectations, like you mentioned, but it's hard to do in the heat of the season when maybe completely on your own. You can think to hire a little bit of that out, hire out somebody that will be your right-hand person for some of that communication, so that you can say, oh my goodness, I just learned this. I need you to make that happen. Hire somebody that is able to manage your Facebook page a little bit, make some of those updates on your website, because you just don't have enough time to make all of that happen as a small business owner. And so I advocate that there are people out there that it doesn't have to be like a huge expense. You don't have to look for the largest marketing firm in your area. You can make that happen, especially with a lot of the college age students, even younger people that have a handle on a lot of those platforms. With some coaching, with your wisdom and mature coaching, they can use that. They can help you, make some of those communications and make them happen more timely than you could if you were, just doing it all on your own. So that's kind of where I go with that.
Oh, okay. That sounds like what I talked to a few weeks ago on another program about doing some outsourcing.
Yeah, outsourcing. You're right. You're right.
So that would definitely help there. Then, of course, as you mentioned, being evident, being out, being visible in the community. That's important. That's important as well.
Yeah, it just kind of depends on where your clientele come from, where the taxpayers are that are seeking your services. And I think that we've learned with COVID, it can be anywhere. You don't have necessarily the bounds of maybe even your own town, your own city, your own county, as much as you might have before. And that can be a real positive thing if you're ready for it.
Yes, definitely there. And that's so important to have all of those. And I really like those 5 E's. That's why I noted them down here, because those are, I know I got some work to do, and I'm going to work at it. And I appreciate you really explaining those well. So to help me and even help your tax professional. So if you're a taxpayer listening to this, you can sit and think, is the person that does my taxes, do they do these things? Or if you're a person that's using do-it-yourself software, you can think, does the software do these things for me?
I promise you it doesn't.
Yeah, definitely there. Even if, because some of them even offer certain, I will say, free things with them, or free whatever, but I put free in quotes because to me, free is more of a marketing gimmick than anything on each of those. So just to be aware of it, and we'll expand into that on the next area here about software companies, this is something that I'm just going to say off the bat, which is why I'm talking to Catherine here, is that Taxware Systems is loyal to the tax professional. They're a very loyal company. They do not market software to taxpayers. They only market it to tax professionals. So with that being said, though, let's take a look here with tax software companies that are disloyal to essentially the tax professionals. So what do you think about this there, Kathy?
I mean, it's pretty blatant. Like I mentioned in the tax industry, our companies that we paid, that we were connected to, like you as a tax professional are paying a license for the software that you use. And so that's your direct connection to your software company. And if you are using certain companies. I mean, TurboTax is the biggest one out there. They call it the TurboTax effect. In insurance, it's called the Geico effect, right? And so when you are paying your license fees as a professional to a company that is putting your license fees into the TurboTax, option for the taxpayer, you're kind of you're funding your own competition. And it's interesting as I talk to different tax professionals, how many don't make that connection. And so it saddens me because and then they get used to a certain software and they don't want to change. And I get it, but I mean, look at the track record. Where's the money going? Where is their emphasis from that company? Is it on really supporting the tax pro, or is it really on supporting their DIY, a front that goes out to the public? And yeah, there's quite a few of them, and I hesitate to name them all because I'm just not, it's just not in my ethical behavior to just blast everybody's, in their company name, but do the research. And when you go in as a taxpayer and I did a lot of research in, just on Google, and you go, should I use a tax professional or should I use, a DIY software? And you start typing in, do I need a tax professional? And article after article are written to try to explain that to the taxpayer, and most of them have hyperlinks up the wazoo to all of these different DIY software. So even the articles that you're trying to read, to get like an answer from are pointing you towards, subliminally pointing you towards the DIY software, where they get credit and financially, recognized on the back end for the blogs that they've put out. So I just say, kind of buyer beware on where you're getting your information.
Yeah. Well, and I've never done a search like you just described there, but it certainly makes a lot of sense there. Because I will even say this, because I get emails directly from the IRS, and it seems like some of those are even pushing DIY software.
Honestly, yeah, I have felt the same. And significantly in the last 2 years, I've seen them push their free file software, which, for the very, very, very basic return that has, very little income, no schedules, no other forms, what have you, I can get it. You're under a certain, income limit. I can get it. But when you go to look for those, you have to be really careful, because you can end up, you get so far in, you've already put in all this information, and then all of a sudden you figure out you need maybe another form or what have you, and then they start charging you for those. And what turned out is your free file didn't end up so free by the time you're finished with your service with them. And so I think that's one of the reasons we mentioned TurboTax. I think they've pulled out of that free file offering just because they didn't want to jump through the IRS hoops anymore. So at least that's what I had read most recently. So you have to be aware of that.
Yeah. Well, and regardless whether it's the free file or whatever DIY software it is that I know, like I say, because I've dealt with fixing a lot of these tax returns, which is why I caution any taxpayer to use a do-it-yourself software, because especially if you have a rental home or even a basic business, anything like that, you think it's simple. Of course, the so-called free systems start charging you for once you start adding certain forms. Plus, you as a taxpayer are often relying upon the questions that the software is asking you to put it in the right place. Unfortunately, though, it's just like anything. If you don't answer the question the right way, it will go who knows where.
Right. Right.
And
And it might be another question on whether or not it should go in another place that would benefit you more, in
mhm.
another, slot, or, um, postpone for a year or two, whether or not you should deduct it now or over time.
Yeah, yeah, and that's something that really a tax professional can really tell you. And someone which is a lot of these, like say a lot of these, some of these offer additional support that you're supposed to be able to have. I've never used it, I don't know, but they claim to offer some additional support, be able to talk to a
Hmm.
person live or a tax expert to help you to do your tax return or whatever.
Hmm.
But how is it really personal though? I mean, this person may see you one time and then may never see you again. You
Yeah.
may try to use that software again next year, and then you could have a different person assisting you. Who knows? Because
Hmm.
the individuals that do that are great people, but are they necessarily going to do it every year?
Yeah.
Not
Are
necessarily.
you really saving time and money if you do that way?
That's the other part. And so, whereas if someone uses a tax professional like myself, whether we do it through a video conference meeting and do it all
Hmm.
electronically, or if
Hmm.
you physically come to the office, you're going to have this here to take care of you. Somebody who's
Yeah.
familiar with your situation, that you don't have to sit there and go through the being treated like a new client again, which is essentially to me, in some of those instances, you are, because you got to ask the questions and go through all the information. And once you get to know somebody, you maybe ask a few nosy questions to see, get any updates. But really, that's where the DIY software just is really lacking there.
Yeah.
So
And you mentioned those connections. And you mentioned, we have uh, a recently launched software called TaxCom that
mhm,
provides those communication tools for the individual tax professional, to be able to communicate, on all platforms in a format where somebody is not willing or interested to come into your office. And so that just those same things that you just
mhm,
mentioned, there are tools out there for you to be able to make that happen even
mhm.
more now than there was ever before.
Yeah. Yeah, which is why I've even talked about previously about how tech savvy is your tax professional.
Yeah.
And which is why I talk about things like using portals and e-signature and all of these things, which of course a year ago really needed to come out on the floor. But even now, this is something tax professionals need to deal with. And even as a taxpayer, under the current circumstances, if you're not comfortable going to an office, do
Hmm.
they provide these services? We do here, and I've been doing
Hmm.
that for years, really. So uh,
Hmm.
that's just some of these industries, some of these challenges that we have. So we've done some comparison here between taxes and the insurance industry. There, do you want to
Hmm.
expand on any of that a little bit more about some of these comparisons?
I just think that it just, yeah, it just the disservice that the larger, tax software companies, just don't provide for the people that they're paying their license fees to. I mean, I feel like they're not providing that extra marketing, that extra support, that extra, yeah, maybe some education, get your continuing education, great. But what are they doing to help that, tax professional, the independent
Mhm,
tax professional, succeed? In spite of the fact that they are providing a heck of a huge competition, both in marketing dollars and um, in a force behind their software to target that independent taxpayer.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah. So it's just something that we got to be aware of. And I know, of course, every company has their software, and some uh, do this competition with the
Hmm.
tax pros. Others do not, and some have really pricey software. Some have very good value software. But one thing that's always amazed me is I've gone through and looked and saying, "Wow, I didn't realize they were doing that.
Hmm.
They were competing against me." It's just phenomenal. But anyway, yeah. So I
When
think
the
what this
time comes, are they going to represent you? You know what I mean? Your
mhm,
DIY software, are they going to represent you
mhm,
when these challenging, when or if not in, I've not if when you get a letter from the IRS and
mhm.
questioning something that how
Yeah.
things were added up in your return. And the other part is, um, like the last 2 years really, but last year especially, there is so many things that changed in the middle of the season,
Mhm.
where you had the opportunity, Marcelino, if somebody had filed early, we especially put in new reports and things like that for our tax professionals to be able to kind of glean who those people were that may or may not have needed to now amend, or
Mhm.
at that point we learned later, wait for the government to modify like that unemployment
Mhm.
compensation, um, those figures. You're not going to get that kind of service from a DIY software. The tax
Mhm.
professional is the one, and
Yeah.
I think that effort, that extra effort that you make as a tax professional, really in the long run saves time and money, and gives you an advocate. We all need to find
Mhm.
financial planning advocates, early on in life, in my opinion. And when you need those
Mhm.
people that will stand by you and that are going to,
Mhm.
learn your life, which is, you divulge a lot of it, as we mentioned earlier, um, and to just be able to rely on and to lean on, and help them get through, especially if things, I hope they don't change, as often as they did this last season.
Mm. Yes, well, certainly we want to hopefully they don't change things, but that's been kind of the nature of what the whole tax law has been the last 5 years. There's been so many changes, last minute changes, and then us as tax professionals are trying to get them processed, and then tax software companies like Taxware is trying to get them worked into their software.
Mhm.
And then, of course, what most taxpayers don't realize on do-it-yourself software is that software is not just dealing with uh, IRS rule changes. It's
Mhm.
dealing with state changes in
Mhm.
40, was it 43 states that have income tax. I always
Mhm.
misplace that number there, but
Mhm.
it's right around that have income tax. So then you got those rules as well,
Mhm.
which that taxpayers don't realize that maybe the do-it-yourself will mess up on the state side, not necessarily the IRS side.
And a lot of states, they they flip flop their opinion on some of whether they were going to follow the IRS side, and
Mhm.
then they changed their mind, and I've heard of a few that changed their mind back again. So it was definitely an insane
Mhm.
year to just try to be out there navigating
Mhm.
your taxes, your tax preparation, on your
Mhm.
own.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just know for Colorado, we had to go back in and do like a miscellaneous addition because Colorado didn't was going to tax that unemployment, even though it wasn't taxed at the federal level, they were still going to tax it at the state level. So we
And
had to
they
go.
stuck with that. Some changed back again.
As far as I know, they stuck with it. I hadn't read anything differently, unless I missed it, which
Oh, they probably did. You're
it was.
probably
But
right. It's just, yeah, we're dealing with all of the states. So,
yeah, so yeah,
we hear it all.
but one thing usually with Colorado is compared to most states, Colorado is pretty simple because they mirror most of the federal
Mhm.
stuff. So
That's
from
ideal.
what I've worked with in most states, Colorado is one of the simplest state wise compared to most
That's
states.
nice.
They mirror a lot of things so that we don't have to go back and mess with this federal or this no or depreciate things differently because the state looks at it differently than the federal does. Usually we don't have to mess with that. So which is one thing I'm grateful about doing mostly Colorado returns, but that don't stop me from working elsewhere if I need to and getting everybody else's rules. So just another
Yeah.
idea to keep in mind with DIY software. It's not just federal, it's state. And so I know that many were
Mhm.
scrambling because of the unemployment change and it could, and if you are trying to do something on a do-it-yourself software and
Mhm.
in some in a state like Kansas or New York or whatever, or California,
Mhm.
that may not get it right for the state.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yep. I would say, like I said, I advocate for using the tax professional, because that
mhm,
is, if they say, they might even, their advice might even be like, hold off, like, let's give it a couple weeks. Let's
mhm,
let some of this legislation settle down. And then let's, because your return is,
mhm,
just that complicated or simple enough. Yeah, let's put it through today. So I think that just having that, it it is worth its weight in gold to have your hand held on some of these matters that um, that are so important.
mhm. Yeah, they are to actually have that extra assistance. So important. So did you have the stats from 18 to present on how things have been increasing?
Yeah, so I mean, when I've studied it, having looking at the last 2 years, you can't even really compare apples to apples.
Mm-hmm.
But 2018, 2019, we didn't have, taxi tax year, or excuse me, tax seasons, not tax years. You didn't have COVID in the mix on those,
Mm-hmm.
and some all those extra things that did definitely drive some those self preparation numbers to go up. But in 2018, 2019 versus those 2 years, the DIY use of software rose 4.2%. And I don't have the stats from the year prior. I know that it was an increase over 2017 to
Mm-hmm.
2018. Now 2019 to 2020, because of COVID and because of all
Mm-hmm.
of those people that don't normally have to file, and they had to
Mm-hmm.
file certain things, that kind of skewed the numbers. It'll take a little bit before we have some apples to apples numbers again, but in general, those numbers still showed an increase in self preparation, and the trend is up. And that was the thing with in insurance, the trend was climbing every year, that more and more people were purchasing their
Mm-hmm.
insurance through into through DIY software online. And again, it's an industry that has a lot of complicated coverages, complicated
Mm-hmm.
definitions. Am I covered for this? Am I not covered for that? And so to see more and more people, go direct to the internet to solve those challenges,
Mm-hmm.
you just know that come claim time, come audit time, to compare the two
Mm-hmm.
industries, you're probably going to suffer, and you're probably going to suffer damages
Mm-hmm.
financially more than of the amount that you would have paid a tax professional. And so that's in the long run, their
Mm-hmm.
advice, finding a good one that's well recommended,
Mm-hmm.
like yourself, Marcelino, that is, it's worth its, like I said, worth its weight in gold.
Okay. Yeah, definitely there because what a lot of taxpayers don't realize when they go in, if they're trying to, like I will say, do it all themselves, from doing their own accounting work and then trying to do their own tax work, trying to do all of that, it will very much be a challenge for them come audit time. Because
Mhm.
as as I was listening to another podcast just yesterday regarding how the IRS, and this is something many taxpayers don't realize, IRS has statutory authority to request a copy of their QuickBooks backup file.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and most taxpayers don't realize that, and see when they set up their do-it-yourself software, which so many of them I've seen when I get
Mhm.
these profit and loss from ones that have tried to do it themselves, I see stuff that's in expenses that's not an expense. I see stuff on a balance sheet that shouldn't be on the balance. Anyway, stuff that's all over the place.
Mhm.
And what most taxpayers don't realize is that if they do get audited and the IRS requests that, there's everything on there.
Yeah.
If you go, and so even if you go in and make these corrections or whatever, there's like an audit trail in there showing exactly what happened, when it happened, and everything. And so that's where it's important to have a professional actually from the start of the business working with you, because I know a lot of the software, do it yourself software, whether it's accounting or tax, it asks you questions
Mhm.
and how to set it up. And just, if you don't understand the accounting principles, which most people are very good at what they do, but just accounting principles can be complicated for someone who's good at another task. But
Mhm.
if you don't answer the questions right, once again, everything's going to end up all over the place. And then either you need to just trash that system and start again, or have someone come in and help you to fix it, get it right, and make
Yeah.
sure payment like loan payments are not an expense. They're a payment, they go in another spot, and all these
Mhm.
kind of deals. So that's where most doing yourself great, but sometimes it's just cheaper on the
Mhm.
long run. It's cheaper to just have someone take care of that for you, and then that way you can go out and make the money, more money probably than than what you're spending to get it done.
And I talk about that in some of the presentations I've done, is that the fact that you get to actually spend your time working on your business versus in your business. You know what I mean? There are those tasks that you will spend quite a bit of time, like you mentioned, in that accounting area that you may or may not have an expertise in as the taxpayer, as the small business owner. And it is well worth your time to let somebody else guide you and handle that, and let yourself, improve your business, grow your business.
Yes. And so as we roll back around here from do-it-yourself software over back to thinking about the tax professionals, one of the questions we ask, and I think this is a good question: are tax professionals aware of this trend, and do they realize it's affecting them? I'll just tell you right now, I think some aren't aware of the trend.
I think you're right.
So
I know you're right.
How do you feel about this, Catherine?
Well, we have taken actually every event that we attend, we have surveyed the people. Number one, just asking them, when we get to meet with them person to person. But because of COVID, a lot of our the education events that we've attended have been online. And in that virtual format, it has some pros and cons. And one of the pros is that we were able to put out a survey to people that were, present at that educational conference. And I would say a good majority of them are in denial. Like, yes, yes, it's affecting my business some. Some others were saying, yes, it's affecting my business a lot. No, all my clients are loyal. Over the last 2 years, I've seen the number of no, all my clients are loyal. That percentage of people that have answered that way has decreased for sure. And so it's definitely been interesting to get that feedback for people to go like, okay, yeah, this is important. This is disrupting my business. This could be detrimental in a big way. Am I using a software company that is promoting the use of DIY to the taxpayer? I don't know how you could sleep at night and do both of those things. It's not going to change if. And yeah, one person, making a change in their software, is that going to, really, totally affect the industry? No, but it's kind of like, in my opinion, a little bit like ethical investing. You've heard of that before. Is that something that you want to, you believe is strongly enough to take a stand in to support, your industry, to support the business that you provide, and the services that you provide to others? If you don't see that there's a high hypocrisy in that, I'm glad you do.
Yeah. Well, that's true of so many industries and so many things. It's like that's one of the reasons I don't use personally within my business a certain company for accounting software. It may be the most popular, and I see a lot of professionals use it or whatever, but I only use it when absolutely essential. Otherwise, I don't. Otherwise, I there's another company that I use, and they operate similar as Taxware Systems does, that they only market through. It's only available through accounting professionals, which is very nice. Which has really helped me to focus on thinking about how I can use this, and of course I got a payroll system too, which actually I find just great and amazing. And what's nice when I talk to clients about this on their payroll, as compared to even the big payroll processors that are really commonly out there and everything, is that in my case, I got some that actually use my system to process their payroll, but if they have a problem, they don't call an 800 number, they call me. And so I get in there and I can, oh yeah, this boom, or they email me, and usually within a few minutes I have it fixed or whatever, so they don't have to deal with an 800 number or a menu or anything like that. Because I've never had any experience with any of the big payroll providers, but anytime an 800 number is involved, we know that there's usually a waiting time.
Yeah, and maybe not even in this country. But one that's interesting, I had a conversation with a tax professional where they did use a big payroll company, and they process the payroll for their clients. And that big payroll company started soliciting the business to her now end clients that of course, she wants to have come back and have, them
Mhm.
do their returns and do their
Mhm.
tax returns for them. And so it, it was like a backhanded slap that these people were getting double marketed against her, who was
Mhm.
providing, the payroll services that she. And anyway, it was very frustrating to her to have them receive that kind of marketing and communication just because they were the recipient of their payroll through this software.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And so, yeah, that's, I don't know. It's just that's just made me feel uncomfortable. And at least for me personally, it doesn't work for my ethics. I got to be able to work with a company that I feel isn't out there trying to steal my client away from me. And I would think even from a taxpayer perspective, once they understand or once they know that, this company is is marketing to them, but they're also marketing to my tax professionals. Like, wait a minute, what are they doing?
Yeah,
They're
I mean, that's kind of when it hits you real hard, right? Is
yeah.
like right in the face, like, wait a minute.
Yeah, and it's always interesting because I talk to taxpayers. Sometimes they'll say something like about the TurboTax, and I will say something. Do you know that they also make software for tax professionals? And they'll just give me that blank stare, like, huh? They do that? I'm like, well, yeah, they do that. Or they're like, oh, they'll go, oh, I didn't know that. So it's just amazing to think about that it's important for taxpayers to know this. They see these ads, and I even think about even some of the franchise companies that essentially do the same thing to their franchisers.
Yeah,
At least that's the way it comes across to me. You see these ads go across, use this software, whatever, but it's like, wait a minute, I see this franchise over here in my town
hmm
that's doing business, and you're advertising to use their online software. Ah,
yeah, hmm yeah.
you-
I
So I think that's another
yeah,
smart. They're a franchiser, but they're still a tax professional, a small business tax professional like me,
right,
essentially.
yeah,
They just
paying
have a
franchise fees.
yeah, they just got a franchise fee. They got a franchise
hmm
name, and their own franchise is competing against them.
You're right. You're right.
And so to me, that's a little. I could if I was a franchise owner, and like I say, I don't know the whole story about it, but looking into it from
hmm
the outside, uh, it looks it looks like it would be disheartening to the small business owner that's a franchise person to have their franchise competing against them,
Yeah.
saying their own software out there, be it an online marketing or be it they're heavy in television, of course, in January all the time. So
hmm
that's just another area where it's, I don't know, to me that as a tax professional would be
Yeah.
difficult to do. Now, the other part too that kind of bugs me, because I've actually been approached with this a few times, is when an EA, an enrolled agent, or a CPA often, and I've mentioned this earlier about they'll often be used to be like supporting them through the through the software. We're going to provide you with an expert to help do your taxes. It's like,
hmm
huh, I don't know.
I mean,
I
they're
don't know.
actively soliciting them to be employed for them. And yeah, I wonder, and I'm curious your thoughts on that, because that's the position you're in that,
Well, then,
I mean, I
yeah,
could see the,
I mean, I'll admit I've been solicited. I received those things. So
Mhm,
I just out of curiosity, I kind of uh, just kind of inquired on it a little bit a few years
mhm,
ago. And I get those solicitations. I think usually they'll start about this time of year in October and run through the end of the year. And at least for me personally, it's like, I don't know, it's one of those ethical thing to me. It's like, wait a minute, I want to work for this company that's trying to take business away from other professionals.
mhm.
And the fact is, they wouldn't pay me, at least for me personally, they wouldn't pay me enough to even do it.
And to just be one of their,
Just to be available on the phone or through video
mhm,
conference or whatever. I mean, for me, ethically, it just won't work.
yeah,
So
I,
I personally won't do that.
and I would think that you are busy enough, with your current clients and what have
Mhm.
you during that time of year. Would you really, to shift gears on and representing, an online company in for a couple hours a day?
Yeah.
I don't know. It doesn't sit well with me either.
Yeah. It's, it's just another one of those things. I mean, maybe for some EAs or CPAs, maybe it works good for them. That's their choice. That's
hmm
their business. I certainly can respect that. It's just for me, it's not something at least currently I wouldn't do, but
Yeah.
Who knows? Things could change. But yeah, I'm pretty much busy enough during that time of year where I'm not going to do that. And I really want people to understand as they listen to this that do-it-yourself software is really, I mean, it's good software. The companies that they put it together, but to me, it is so impersonal.
And that's
And
where, and if the tax professional is not, kind of doing those 5 E's, like I mentioned,
mhm,
they kind of become impersonal just as well. You know what I
mhm,
mean? And not even, they're going to get more emails from the DIY than they do from their current, tax professional.
mhm,
They're going to think that the software cares more. So
yeah,
that's where,
mhm,
in that way, you got to set yourself
yeah.
apart as a professional.
Yeah, in some ways, that's why I try to work at, which I will admit I haven't been the best at, but I've been working at doing things like maybe sending out more emails. Uh, and I've been using regular mail sometimes to send stuff to people as well
Mhm.
still, because that's still, at least for the people that I deal with, it seems to be just as effective.
It's even better, I would say, even better.
Because I even had one of my continuing education people I go to, he talked about mailing stuff to people. It's almost like a novelty anymore for people to get a letter.
Right. Yeah. Something other than a bill or a statement. That would be, it just warms your heart, and that's what you need.
And so I'm like, that makes sense. And yeah, granted, it's 50 some odd cents now to send something out. But if it's another one of those deals, you send it out quarterly or monthly, whatever you choose to do. At least I try to do something at the minimum quarterly, but still it's the thought. Or as I mentioned earlier, sometimes I try to pay attention to the local stuff to send out cards to clients and stuff, just to let them know, or if a relative of a client or whatever, if I see a client that died and I know where to send it, I send out a card. Just little things like that are so important to keep the personal, but you're not going to get those kind of cards from your do-it-yourself software. So you just do it, and even just try to make a call once in a while, just to check how they're doing. I did that with a few clients, and but when you have a few hundred clients, you can't quite get through everybody, but still getting the effort out there,
Mhm.
which is what I really try to do. And which is why I appreciate about Taxware is that they make those efforts throughout the year there. So, but Kathy, hope I'm sorry, I called you Kathy there.
My mom would be ashamed, but that's okay. I'll answer to both.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, Catherine, I do thank you for being on today. We're just running out of time. It's been a very wonderful discussion about DIY software, why the tax professional needs to make themselves stand out, and why this is important for the taxpayer to know this, because it's not just, what's the word I'm looking for? Roses. It's not just rose covered glasses just because you use your do-it-yourself software. There's a lot more
Yeah.
to it, and you realize a lot more behind the scenes. So we just want everybody to know that. So anyway, I'm going to remind everyone, if you're anything come up today, you want to talk about more, you're always welcome to give me a call here at successcashtracksfinancial.com. Of course, phone number, which is 844-394-4287. We have a few mutual exploration session open to anybody in the country, because I'm an enrolled agent, happy to help service you with this free mutual exploration session to understand a little bit about your situation and give you the personal service that you deserve, that you just cannot get from a do-it-yourself software. You can also schedule that at cashtracksfinancial.com. So once again, Catherine, I thank you so much for your time today.
My
It's been
pleasure.
great. And so we'll look forward to talking to everyone once again next week, always 9 a.m. Pacific, here on the Tax Answers Advisor with Marcelino Dodge on the Voice America Business Channel.